Stephanie Hadik has been going to Mongolia and living with the nomads since she was 4 years old. Her mother first went there as a research assistant with the UNESCO Silk Route expedition, and she fell in love with the country and passed on that love to her daughter. In this talk, we're going to see images from the whole of Stephanie's life on the steppe. Please join me in welcoming Stephanie to the stage. Welcome. Do you need a hand?
Just a little prop. Okay, so Outer Mongolia. Well, the trip all began in Ulaanbaatar, the capital, where we were welcomed by an old friend who we met on a past trip. Her name is Paruvma, and we're very lucky to have known her because she spoke a little bit of English and some German because she studied sausage making in Eastern Germany when Mongolia was under the influence of the Soviet Union. So, she helped us buy a bootload of non-perishable foods, some gifts, and petrol, all to last us about 3 months for the trip. The next step to our journey, and probably one of the most important, was finding a reliable jeep and a suitable driver. This was a bit different to usual, as in fact you have to buy the jeep and buy the driver on the black market. So we were faced with the unusual dilemma of having a row of men in front of us, all showing us their muscles, whereas all we really wanted to know was if they could actually drive. Well, we were lucky. We found one that could, so we set off. The aim for our trip was to visit 3 nomadic brothers we had become great friends with in 2005. When we left, they gave us both a horse as a gift, and we promised to visit and check how our livestock family was doing. So leaving the city of Ulaanbaatar is exhilarating, as it really is a trip into the unknown. There's only one main road out of the city. We had hardly any maps, and the sole instruction we had to find our nomadic family was to go north, passing the province of Trobisen. So on the way, we either pitched our tents or we stayed in the Gur, the home of Mongolia, which looks a bit like a tea cozy in the distance. So this complete potluck travel tactic of arriving and turning up was one of the best ways to meet new and different families along the way. Each time we stayed in a different Gur, we learnt new tips on how to act more Mongolian, despite the out-of-place appearance. So, for example, when you near a Gur, you must shout, "Hold your dogs," if you don't want to be gnawed to death by the guard dogs and save all your limbs for the next leg of the journey. So when you enter the Gur, there's the normal small talk of particular focus on ancestors and questions such as, are you wintering well, and are your sheep getting fat? Not a question I'm usually faced with on a day-to-day basis. The Gur is very structured. The north part is the sacred part, which holding religious relics, medals, a plentiful supply of vodka, and nowadays a satellite TV. The left side is the woman's domain, and the right side is the man's domain, which stereotypically holds the hunting equipment. When I was first welcomed into the family, they immediately all came up and sniffed me on the cheeks. This naturally surprised me a little at first, but I soon learned this was the equivalent of a kiss and a hug. After the introduction, the hostess will then set about making tea. This is done in the central half of the Gur, where water is boiled with shavings from a solid brick of China tea. The tea is then served in the Mongolian way, of course, with fresh pasteurized milk, a dash of salt, and if you're especially lucky, as I often was, a generous blob of butter or fat. This is one of those things that works in Mongolia, but maybe not so much when you bring the culture back to London. And you sit there with a cup of Earl Grey tea and a blob of utterly butterly margarine floating on top. And believe me, I've tried and not recommended. So, the landscape of Mongolia is vast. You can easily fit the UK 7 times into the size of Mongolia with space to spare. The roads can sometimes even be non-existent, but it didn't seem to bother our driver, who confidently drove off into a bog. But despite the sparse Mongolian population of about 1.9 people per square kilometre, a lone horseman managed to find us and help us get the vehicle out of trouble. So after a long drive, we eventually arrived at the province of Chobisen, where our friend Provma left us to fend for ourselves with a notebook of some handy and not so handy sentences in Mongolian, varying from, please can I have some water, to I would like to see the horses, which is the equivalent of, please may I go to the loo. The next step to our journey followed on horseback. This meant that we had to cut down massively on our possessions, only keeping sleeping bags, camera stuff, and some gifts, which were vodka, tea, and salt. As well as this, we kept our dried apricots from London, which proved to be the only source of fruit we had. There was a small group of us, my mother, some young horsemen, and an old grandpa that led the way. It was incredibly fun, galloping across the steppes of Mongolia, just as you imagine when you think of the Mongols. But it was also incredibly tough going, not helped by the traditional Mongolian wooden saddle. Although it is very pretty and the delicate silver work is a work of art in itself, this is not very comfortable after hours and hours of riding, as it digs and digs into your upper thighs. We were beginning to lose hope because we really could not find the nomadic family, but eventually the girl was spotted in the distance. We had arrived. So in total, our journey consisted of traveling about 700 kilometers by jeep from Ulaanbaatar to Chobisen, followed by 250 kilometers by horseback to find them close to the Chinese border. And this lasted about 10 days of intense riding. The three nomadic brothers lived separately in the winter, but come together in summer to help with communal activities such as food preparation for the winter months. The middle brother, Tsitsime, lived with his grandma, Yanksma, who made me a beautiful del, which you can see here, the traditional dress of Mongolia for both men and women. I mean, I would describe it as a cross between a dressing gown and a tunic, and it fastens at the top right-hand corner. And the part here is used the same way as women in the Western world use a handbag to carry all your personal belongings. The del is always accompanied with a bus, a belt, which provides extra support when riding, and the long sleeves are a sign of respect towards your elders. The day in Mongolia will start very early, with the men catching the wild horses and the women rounding up the livestock for milking. I did try to milk the mares, but this was very difficult, so I was relegated to milking the goats instead. The mare's milk is known as airag. It's put into bags, stirred regularly, and left to ferment. It tastes a bit like sour, liquidy yogurt. It's definitely an acquired taste, but it's quite relaxing after a long day's ride. But part of the tradition is to express your utmost appreciation for each individual family brew, a bit like craft beers in UK pubs. Not that I would know. So food on the trip was no problem. I could always predict what I was going to get. This could be mutton broth, mutton ravioli, mutton with fat, and by far my favorite, as a delicious dessert, sugared mutton. The Mongolians never miss the opportunity to have a vodka or 2 or 5 in the evenings. So many hours are spent exchanging deep-throated Mongolian songs with my out-of-tune, squeaky nursery rhymes. But what I lacked in singing skills, I hopefully made up with my evening ritual of removing and cleaning my contact lenses. It seemed to be a subject of fascination that I could remove the outer layer of my eye, show no pain at all, and keep it in a container for the next day. The Festival of Malim unites Mongolians throughout the country. It celebrates the 3 traditional sports of Mongolia: horse racing, archery, and wrestling. And it was of particular importance to the Bimba family that I was staying with, as their 9-year-old son was competing in the horse racing. In Mongolia, it is in fact the first 5 horses that win the race, and the last horse that wins the tortoise prize. And it has a special song sung in its honor entitled Full Stomach, because it was so slow. During the festival, the family treated me like a prized possession, always caring for me, and they even smacked an attempted pickpocket and forced him to give me a sweet by way of apology. And many people coming up to me, pulling my hair and looking at my unusual eye color. And I even had someone come up to me and wondering if my freckles were real or just specks of dirt. Throughout the trip, I made many friends and memories, And I took many pictures. For example, I took this picture of a young Mongolian girl, and I used it for inspiration for my final GCSE art exam. Along with this, the exchange of gifts is a very important culture in Mongolia. I was lucky enough to receive 2 sheep and 2 goats, all with a patch of red hair to match mine, in 2012. And in the last trip, I received the head goat, who I named Button, because he would never stop nibbling the buttons on my shirt. The Mongolians are very sad that I could not take him back to me with London, but I promised to visit, and I can't wait to fulfill that promise. So thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it.